May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. The most noteworthy story from today's lineup is probably the one that forms our first lesson, where we'd normally have a reading from the Old Testament. It's the piece from Acts relating Paul's speech on the Areopagus, the hill of Ares, whence the name Mars Hill, since Mars is the Latin name normally assigned to the Greek god of war, Ares. It's a remarkable story, but despite all the triumphalist rhetoric I've encountered about it online, it's arguably not one of Paul's greatest successes. He had a lot of other encounters with various Greek city-states that were more effective at gaining converts. This one went over like the proverbial lead balloon, to judge from the rest of Paul's ministry in Athens. I've heard at least one explanation for it that makes sense to me from a Greek professor in the UCLA Classics department where I did my graduate work. His explanation, and this is matter more of idiom than any hardcore lexical boundaries, is that Paul fundamentally misunderstood the inscription that he cites, to the unnamed God. Professor Blank's argument was that this inscription need not imply that there was such a transcendent and unknowable God in the Greek pantheon. There's no other mention of one anywhere else. But that the dedication was addressed to some god or other, likely among those already known. If this explanation is right, it may indicate that the inscription Paul is citing is more like, to whom it may concern, or mail addressed to occupant. If so, the unknown God was unknown not because he was special, but just because he was the one who wrote the inscription wasn't sure about whom he needed to thank. It's might funny. Paul seems to have thought he was proclaiming a transcendent God in terms that would appeal to the most profound layers of his hearers' consciences, while what they actually heard was something more like, occupant, him I proclaim. To which the only rational response, I think, is, huh? I can't really affirm David Blank's explanation. All this depends on a nuance of Greek usage and diction that's beyond my own expertise. I may be correct, or it may be not. Or, as often with human language attempting to grapple with the divine, it may be a blurry continuum between the two. Ultimately, though, this narrative, memorable as it is a mite disappointing. It may really fundamentally rest on a simple misunderstanding. Whether it not, whether it does or not, it clearly failed to form a powerful connection with Paul's Athenian audience. So I'm not going to talk about that a lot more today. What leapt out at me instead today is the bit from the Gospel of John. While what John says is perhaps less theatrical than Paul's speech, it may in fact be addressing some points of current contention, both in our national conversation and in our understanding of our congregation's ministry. There are just two fairly pithy paragraphs. To take them in reverse order, the second hints at a more complete Christology and Trinitarian theology than any of the other Gospels have done. The interrelationship of the persons of the Trinity is itself a great mystery that this doesn't wholly explain, but is one that it does imply. It goes also beyond the persons of the Trinity. Jesus says, "You will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you." We're called to the party, so to speak. That's pretty challenging, and is worth contemplating, though I think there's not a great deal more to say about it, at least not much more that I can make sense of. The first paragraph is what I want to focus on. The part that leapt out at me in particular was, "This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him because he abides with you, and he will be in you." We are living, it's safe to say, in difficult times. Admittedly, that's probably always true in one way or another. There's never a shortage of things to get worked up about. Still, even if it's just my own oddly conservative yet oddly liberal political and theological leanings, the common denominator there being odd, I realize, we seem to be in a current national and world situation that's more fraught with alarming stuff than any time most of us can remember. I won't go into all of it, but the news just about every day seems to beggar belief and to point to a society and culture that's going off the rails and melting into a contentious and incoherent mess. As Christians, we're in a peculiar relationship to this. We are in the world, we're told, but we're not ultimately of it. We strive for justice and truth in all situations, or at least what we recognize as such. And it can feel pretty bleak when that doesn't seem to be coming together. Often it feels as if the right thing to do, or at least the right general direction to go, is obvious, while a majority of those in power are turning their backs on it. How can we square this with our place in the kingdom of God and with our obligatory ministry to and in the world? There's a lot of ungodly stuff going on out there, and it seems to be beyond our power to fix it. Well, first of all, if we hang our assessment of ourselves on being able to make God validate us, we're doomed to one hard landing after another. God is not our functionary, and we don't have any guarantee that we're going to be able to sell the truth to our fellow human beings. Probably that shouldn't surprise us. In this gospel reading, Jesus tells us pretty clearly that the world cannot receive the Spirit of truth because it does not know him. And sure enough, our daily experience seems to confirm that wholesale. No matter how self-evident a truth may seem, it seems possible to ignore it, deny it, or attack someone bringing it inconveniently to our attention. From a worldly perspective, what's going on is puzzling. What's the outlook? Will things never get better? Well, there's bad news and good news. No, things will never on balance get better. We live in a world that cannot receive the truth, at least not consistently and with humility. We should not be surprised that it doesn't do what it cannot do. Still, there is room for us to work for and toward the truth in spite of the world's shortcomings. In worldly terms, we have an obligation to work for what is right. We also have an assurance that we will lose that battle. There may be local victories, and those are worth pursuing and celebrating, but there's not any ultimate victory in this life. J.R.R. Tolkien put it into the mouth of the elvish Queen Galadriel. If you don't know the work, you need to understand that she is at this point about 7,000 years old, so she's come by her historical perspective the hard way. Together, she says, through the ages of the world we have fought the long defeat. She presents the prospect of this long defeat as a fact, neither as a lament for the loss, nor as a reason to abandon the struggle. It's morally clear-eyed and commendable. It's yet another of the important parts of the book that didn't make it into the movies. This elegiac conundrum, though, is not just something for the elves, it's our human condition. In one of his letters, letter number 195, 1956, Tolkien wrote, "Actually, I'm a Christian and indeed a Roman Catholic, so that I do not expect history to be anything but a long defeat, though it contains, and in a legend may contain more clearly and movingly, some examples of, or some samples or glimpses of final victory." The questions that remain in the wake of this, I think, are profoundly important, full of serious implication for how we live our lives. We can decide that recognizing this ultimate defeat in worldly terms points to the ultimate failure of everything, so that there's really no point in continuing to fight. We have no reason to expect ultimate victory in this life. We pretty well have a guarantee of the opposite. Our individual lives will ultimately end in death. Every good thing that mankind brings forth in this world will ultimately perish. Every state, every city, every fellowship of people, or creation of any sort will last only for a while, and will ultimately dissolve and be lost. Even our memories dwindle and wane and eventually wink out. If you think that our current civilization is the exception just because we're here, think again. The preponderance of the evidence is steeply stacked against you. So, this sounds like pretty depressing news, especially for the Easter season. I guess it is on the world's view. But I still don't think we need to capitulate. From outside that flawed framework, it's laden with enormous promise and almost infinite challenge to us as humans and Christians. We do what we do for the time we inhabit. It's where we are living and what we have to work with. It keeps things on a human scale. We are finite beings. Our work is finite too. We do it for love, not for profit. It's also liberating. We don't have to solve everything for all time. This is good since we can't. On the bright side, It's like a game that can never be wholly won, but is not limited. There are some games where there is an endpoint that defines victory. If you arrive there, you win, and there an end. If you want to play it over again from the beginning, you can, but it is not infinitely extensible in its individual instantiation. Other games are open-ended, and you continually play against increasingly difficult situations until eventually you lose as you must. Think of Tetris if you've ever seen it. Nobody wins at Tetris. Is life like the game where you can win once and for all, or is it the long defeat? In the kind of game you play till you lose, loss is inevitable. But at the same time, such games impose no limits on what we can achieve. As Robert Browning wrote, "Ah, but a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for?" His reason for writing it is perhaps a bit murky since he put it in the mouth of a problematic character. A former student of mine, I love to brag about my former students, named Sarah Michelle Harder, now Bailey, made a video series with a whimsical name, Incognita's Infamous Adventures. It's a short musical comedy series in 4 parts, adding up to a little more than an hour. Some of it is very broadly comic, in fact, but just when it's silliest, it hits you with some genuine insight. It's available on Amazon streaming and also on YouTube now. I recommend it. It's funny and it has some catchy tunes, but it also has some great-souled humanity. Its lead character, Anna Jane Pazeski, with an alternative identity as Incognita, is a superhero and of very limited powers. She auditions for the Superhero League, but as it turns out, she's just not good enough to make the cut. She really wants to get in so she can continue being a superhero and get things like a dental plan and an income to live on. Her superpowers kind of sputter and don't always work right. Her healing gift is not a total washout, but it's imperfect and not at all reliable. So, to make ends meet, she has to work in an office for a company called The Place Where Things Are Edited, where she has a horrible boss and winds up fiddling with type fonts and computers and teaching people the distinction between there, the adverb, there, the possessive adjective, and there, the contraction of they are. But it's a grind and things go badly for her in several ways. She and her sidekick are about ready to throw in the towel when she's confronted with a situation where she has to go all in on her faltering superpowers to save the day, or else a lot of people will die. She has a revelation that I can't make things perfect, but I can make things better. The imperfect things she's able to do are not the greatest or and best conceivable, but they're not nothing either. She can improve things here and now. To put it into the terms that relate to who we are, she can minister to a word in need locally and temporarily. And that's a good thing. It's a real thing, and it's our thing. It's contrary to much of today's success-driven culture, but given the fallenness of the world, I would argue that defeat has its place, an essential place in the eternal economy of salvation. We cannot, this side of Jordan, escape the limitations of the fallen world. But we can poke our heads up from our corner of history from time to time, and in serving the God who transcends time, win some local victories for the way, the truth, and the life. Like Tolkien's elves, we are fighting the long defeat. We will lose. Loser is one of the slurs that many sling around as a term of contempt. I'm not sure that it should be so. To reflect on the fact that we are losers is, in its most nuanced way, elegiac and beautiful. It bespeaks an attempt to achieve, to reach despite our limitations, an effort in which we will ultimately fail, but which will nevertheless not be wasted effort. We live in time. That may not be just a limitation, I think it's a gift. But it goes both ways. By the grace of God, we are able to fail and yet go on, at least for a while. Our identity does not rise and fall with our inventory of victories or defeats. We are not the sum of our achievements. For that, I'm very grateful. The greatest achievements are definitionally beyond us, but we can reach toward them and by God's grace occasionally bring forward an image of the truth. Like Incognita, we can't make things perfect, but we can make them better. Amen.